All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we're just trying to document um, some great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, earth-shattering discoveries, magnum opuses, tour de forces, grand unified theories, uh, primarily from obscure sources, ancient and modern, and we try to help you out with your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health by turning you on to these things that can change your life if you only knew about them. And we're in the category of really the works of Josephus as well as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And these are both from the 1st century AD, and more than likely, some say the Dead Sea Scrolls are dated earlier than that, but it doesn't quite line up. But the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the mid-40s, mid-1940s, and they were a bunch of texts, 800 separate works, including the entire New Testament, the entire Old Testament, except for Esther, and many sectarian works near Jerusalem, 20 miles away by the Dead Sea. And unfortunately, the international team of scholars that was assigned to decipher these things recognized very early that the Dead Sea Scrolls challenged their Catholic beliefs. And so they began to just sit on them and not actually translate them and hide them from the public because either they were embarrassed or just insecure about their beliefs. And it took all the way until the 1990s before these things were in the public hands. Mostly they published, the most innocuous stuff. They put out, but the stuff that was explosive, they hoarded it. And Josephus, as you may know, was a Jew who lived in the 1st century, born in about 37 AD, and he's known by Christians as really the first or the only 1st century source, 1st century historian to actually mention the name of Jesus, which he does in his Jewish Antiquities, all the way from like 93 or 95 AD. But he also has a work from much earlier than that called War of the Jews, which does not mention Jesus. But what it does is it, in really thousands of places, parallels what's written in the New Testament. And then when you find out what the story is with Josephus, you start to smell a rat, because Josephus was a Jewish priest, but he was kind of put into the Jewish army in their war against the Jews, war against the Romans from 66 to 73 AD. And in that, he talks about his campaign or his military service in his War of the Jews, but eventually he's captured. I think he's captured in some way or another. He possibly surrendered, but eventually to Vespasian, the Roman general. And at a certain point, Josephus feels that that God is now favoring the Romans and not the Jews, and so he defects to the Romans and gives Vespasian the star prophecy, saying that you are going to become the emperor. I see it in your future. And when Nero, Emperor Nero, was assassinated in 68 AD, or I think possibly he committed suicide. I can't remember what happened. But there was the year of the four Caesars. There were Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, who were all made Caesar for very brief periods in 68 and 69 AD. And then finally they called for Vespasian when Vitellius was taken down. And so General Vespasian eventually became Emperor Vespasian. He left his son Titus to be the general in this war against the Jews. And Titus began to sack Jerusalem. And that is the subject of most of the War of the Jews. But when Vespasian was made emperor, he got Josephus and pardoned him, or took him out of prison, and adopted him as a member of his own family. Flavius Josephus, that was the name of really the dynasty there that Vespasian started, the Flavian dynasty, which means blonde. And the Flavians were Vespasian from 69 to 79 AD, his son Titus, also the general Titus, 79 to 81 AD, and then his brother, Vespasian's younger son, Domitian, from 81 to 96 AD. And that's the Flavian dynasty. Josephus took the name of the Flavians when he was adopted by Vespasian. He became the court historian for the Romans, and lived at Rome during the time that he wrote War of the Jews and Jewish Antiquities, along with his autobiography. So realistically, Josephus is nothing but a propagandist for the Romans. And that is actually what the Gospels are as well. They are Jewish Roman war propaganda, because the Romans were fighting the Jews in these wars, insurrection after insurrection after insurrection for 125 years, or at least 75 years of really a lot of insurrectionary activity. The Jews would not assimilate the same way. They could not absorb them into the Roman Empire the way they did many other countries, many other provinces or groups of people. Because the Jews had this monotheism thing going on, which incidentally they only had since about the 6th century. After the exile, they really became monotheistic. Before that, it was kind of a bunch of gods going against each other, and Yahweh was, the very jealous God of the other ones, but the monotheism, the no graven images, the kosher diet, or all the dietary restrictions, and the circumcision, these are all things that prevented the Jews from assimilating to the Roman Empire, and made them want to keep fighting and rebelling and insurrecting. And so the Romans realized, especially after Vespasian and Titus, the emperors, were actually both wounded in the war. They were like, we gotta come up with a psychological operation on these Jews to get them to mellow out. And so they enlisted Josephus and a number of other kind of what you call Hellenized Jews, or Westernized or Romanized Jews, and they put together the Gospels. I think it maybe they used things in the Dead Sea Scrolls for, source material. It's possible that somebody like Jesus certainly existed in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was called the Teacher of Righteousness. But they wrote it up, the Gospels, to be very pro-Roman, very anti-Jewish. But they also wrote it up so that you could see a code and parallels between the Gospels and the War of the Jews. Very often, there are parallels between, for example, this is one of many different sets of parallels, is that you see that Jesus has a 3-year ministry in Judea, and Titus has a 3-year military campaign in Judea. They go to parallel places, where they go to the same place, the same theme or the same conceptual thing happens to them. Sometimes it's where Jesus makes a prophecy, says that something is going to happen, and uses proverbial metaphorical language. And then in the War of the Jews, Titus fulfills the prophecy literally. So that's, kind of mocking Jesus. Like Jesus is using the highfalutin symbolic language, and then it comes down literally from Titus. But what it does is it means that if you follow Jesus and you worship Jesus as presented in the Gospels, you are really worshiping Titus. Titus is the second coming of Jesus. And all of the prophecies that are made by Jesus in the Gospels and in Revelation are fulfilled in the War of the Jews. Now, we're going over the major author of this theory of these parallels of the Roman psyop here of the Gospels, and that is Joseph Atwill. He's got a couple books, Caesar's Messiah and Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. We'll get around to the Shakespeare later, but he has one edition of the Caesar's Messiah is called the Flavian Signature, where he goes over 30 or 40 different parallels between a section of War of the Jews from books 4 and 5, and then a section of the Gospels in Luke, I believe Luke 5 through 13 or so. And we are going over some of these parallels. Now, I had messed up my notes here yesterday, and so when I was presenting the 18th parallel, which is called Man in Armor Who Will Be Overcome, I accidentally didn't include the section from Luke. So we're going to go over that right here again, and then we'll move on to, I think, number 21 or so. So 18 is Man in Armor Who Will Be Overcome. And so this is from War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 2, paragraph 73. While the enemy is securely building a kind of city in opposition to us, and while we sit still within our own walls and become spectators only of what they are doing with our hands idle and our armor laid by, as if they were about somewhat that was for our good and advantage, we are, it seems, only courageous against ourselves, while the Romans are likely to gain the city without bloodshed by our sedition. Thus did they encourage one another when they were gotten together, and took their armor immediately, and ran out upon the 10th legion, and fell upon the Romans with great eagerness, and with a prodigious shout, as they were fortifying their camp. Now, the parallel to that is in Luke chapter 11, verse 21. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are safe. But when someone stronger attacks and overpowers him, he takes away the armor in which the man trusted and divides up the spoils. Now, you can definitely say that that's not like such a tight conceptual parallel. But again, what I was saying, what I've been saying the last couple days is that there are so many of these parallels. Some of them are very obvious, but some of them you have to actually be looking for to really find them, because it's all part of a comic joke that they're playing on the Jews and also the Gentiles who believe in this. That they're mocking you, and so it's kind of like a little comedy that the court of Rome is putting on, and so it's like an inside joke that they have with each other, and they point these things out. And as you will see, they actually literally sign their name to this. So you will see eventually that if you take some graph paper out and you plot all the points of the parallels, you will see an image that will show you that they sign their name to this. But that's a little premature, so let's keep going to number 21, called the Woe Saying Jesus. Now, this is a very long passage, but first we start out with what's written here in the book of Luke, chapter 11. Again, these parallels are in order. So as you move through book of Luke, chapter 5 through 13, and then you move through Josephus, War of the Jews, books 4 and 5, you find these parallels in order. Now, from the book of Luke, this is a pretty famous one that you've probably heard before. The Woe Saying Jesus. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like graves which are not seen, and the men who walk over them are not aware. Then one of the lawyers answered and said to him, Teacher, by saying these things you reproach us also. And he said, Woe to you also, lawyers, for you load men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. In fact, you bear witness that you approve the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore, the wisdom of God also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and of them they will kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, who perished between the altar and the temple. Yes, I say to you, it shall be required of this generation. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who were entering in you hindered. Okay, so he says, woe to you 5 different times in that passage. Now we're going to go to War of the Jews. And this is a fairly long quote here, but it's from book 6, chapter 5. And this is referring to a character in the War of the Jews whose name is actually Jesus. Josephus has, I believe, 6 characters in War of the Jews whose name is Jesus. And all of them, I believe, are mocking the Jesus in the Gospels in various ways, or paralleling, parodying the Jesus in the Gospel. But this one especially. Quote, a voice from the east, a voice from the west, a voice from the 4 winds, a voice against Jerusalem and the holy house, a voice against the bridegrooms and the brides, and a voice against this whole people. This was his cry. And that's the end of the this is Josephus then going. This was his cry as he went about day by day and by night in all the lanes of the city, Jerusalem. However, certain of the most eminent among the populace had great indignation at this dire cry of his, and took up the man and gave him a great number of severe stripes, like from whipping him. Yet did not he either say anything for himself or anything peculiar to those that chastised him, but still went on with the same words which he cried before. Hereupon our rulers, supposing, as the case proved to be, that this was a sort of divine fury in the man, brought him to the Roman procurator, where he was whipped till his bones were laid bare. Yet he did not make any supplication for himself, nor shed any tears, but turning his voice to the most lamentable tone possible, at every stroke of the whip his answer was, "Woe, woe to Jerusalem!" Every day uttered these lamentable words as if it were his premeditated vow. Woe, woe to Jerusalem! Woe, woe to the city again, and to the people, and to the holy house. And just as he added at the last, woe, woe to myself also, there came a stone out of one of the engines, which are like the catapults that catapult these stones. There came these really like boulders. There came a stone out of one of the engines and smote him and killed him immediately. And as he was uttering the very same presages, he gave up the ghost. So that's what happened to the woe-saying Jesus. So this, the passages are obviously parallel. There are two separate woe-saying Jesuses in Jerusalem. And it turns out that Atwill actually does the once-over on this, and it happened, the two events happened exactly 40 years apart, according to the dating of the Gospels anyway. This happened in, I believe, 70 A.D. on Passover. They entered Jerusalem during one of the pilgrimage festivals. These are all the parallels. They entered Jerusalem during one of the pilgrimage festivals. They deliver an oracle against Jerusalem, the temple, and the people. They are seized by leading citizens. They are beaten and later scourged. They offer no answer to interrogators. They are taken by them to the Roman procurator. They are called a madman, which in both cases is the Greek word exestokos. And they prophesy their own death, and they die. Not only is the fate of the two Zacharias parallel in this story, but each story depicts wicked lawyers. Okay, now the next parallel is called innocent beaten worse than the guilty. And this is from Luke chapter 12, verse 47. That servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do anything according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required, and to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. Again, the theme there is called innocent beaten worse than the guilty. Now we go to War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 3. Now, I'm not exactly sure why he explains that they went out of order for that, for the one on the woe-saying Jesus, but this is back in order, I think, for the War of the Jews. And when they had done abundance of horrid mischief to the guiltless, they granted a truce to the guilty. Okay, the next one is called the Divide the Group, 3 for 2. Go to War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 3, paragraph 104. And thus that sedition, which had been divided into 3 factions, was now reduced to 2. And from Luke chapter 12, for from now on, 5 in one house will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. So divide the group 3 for 2. The next one is called Cut Down the Fruit Tree. And it starts with Luke chapter 13, verse 6. Jesus envisions a fruit tree outside of Jerusalem that would be cut down, which it was. He also spoke in this parallel, a certain man had, quote, a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. Then he said to the keeper of his vineyard, look, for 3 years I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree and find none. Cut it down. Why does it use up the ground? But he answered and said to him, sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and fertilize it. And if it bears fruit, well, but if not, after that, you can cut it down. And then from Josephus, book 5, chapter 3, paragraph 106. But Titus, intending to pitch his camp nearer to the city than Scopus, placed as many of his choice horsemen and footmen as he thought sufficient opposite to the Jews, to prevent their sallying out upon them, while he gave orders for the whole army to level the distance as far as the wall of the city. So they threw down all the hedges and walls which the inhabitants had made about their gardens and groves of trees, and cut down all the fruit trees that lay between them and the wall of the city. Again, you can say these are long books, yeah, they both have the theme of cutting down a fruit tree, but, that happens in many books, that doesn't show the parallels. But when it does show the parallels, when there are literally hundreds or even thousands of them, and what is showing is a comic mockery. It's an inside joke for the Roman court to be able to mock the Jews and the Gentiles, especially the slaves who they're pitching this Christianity to. Because what they want you to believe in is they want you to believe in not this kind of zealous, insurrectionary Jew, but they want you to believe in the Jew who turns the other cheek and who renders unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and who walks an extra mile with your backpack, with the Roman's backpack. And that's what they're looking for. And so they write it up like very pro-Roman and very anti-Jewish. But they also put many elements of mockery into it. So it serves several purposes. Okay, now this next one is called The Narrow Gate and the Shut Door. And this one starts from Luke 13, chapter 20, verse 22. Strive to enter through the narrow gate, for many, I say to you, will seek to enter and will not be able. When once the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, Lord, Lord, open for us. And he will answer and say to you, I do not know you, where you are from. Then you will begin to say, we ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets. But he will say, I tell you, I do not know you, where you are from. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, and yourself thrust out. They will come from the east and the west, from the north and the south, and sit down in the kingdom of God. And indeed, there are last who will be first, and there are first who will be last. So that parallel is in Josephus, War of the Jews, book 5, chapter 3. And again, this is one of the things where, Jesus is delivering this, the door is open. And for him, the door is very metaphorical, very symbolic. He's not talking about a physical door. He's saying the way is open, the path is open, that, the opportunity is there. But when it turns around into War of the Jews, it turns into much more of a literal event. Josephus also describes the narrow gate that has been shut by the master of the house and the points of the compass. Quote, "So Caesar considered with himself how he might be even with the Jews for their stratagem. And now when the space between the Romans and the wall had been leveled, which was done in 4 days, and as he was desirous to bring the baggage of the army, with the rest of the multitude that followed him, safely to the camp, he set the strongest part of his army over against that wall, which lay on the north quarter of the city, and over against the western part of it, and made his army 7 deep, with the footmen placed before them and the horsemen behind them, each of the last in 3 ranks, whilst the archers stood in the midst of 7 ranks. And now as the Jews were prohibited by so great a body of men from making sallies upon the Romans, both the beasts that bear the burdens and belonged to the 3 legions, and the rest of the multitude marched on without any fear. But as for Titus himself, he was but about 2 furlongs distant from the wall, and that part of it where was the corner, and over against that tower, which was called Cephinus, at which tower the compass of the wall belonging to the north bended and extended itself over against the west. But the other part of the army fortified itself at the tower called Hippicus, and was distant, in like manner, by 2 furlongs from the city. However, the 10th legion continued in its own place upon the Mount of Olives." So they each give a description of Jerusalem just before the triumphal entrance of the Son of Man, and which is Titus is referred to as that Son of God. Titus's father Vespasian was given the devotio, I believe it's called, where he is